What is the single most broken weapon in Splatoon's history? There's definitely a few different candidates across the game, like Splatoon 1's launch E-liter with 4 damage up burst bombs and a 12-second auto-locator, or this monstrosity that we're gonna get into later, I promise. But the start of Splatoon 2 has the candidate that was the most popular broken weapon ever introduced, and that is the Tri-Slosher. Today, we're gonna break down Splatoon 2's early meta when the entire game was taken over by this bucket over here. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoy, and let's get started with what exactly made it good. And well, it isn't super complicated. Tri-Slosher is a fairly mobile slosher with a giant hitbox that can two-shot opponents. And it had that before, but when it got put into Splatoon 2, the range of it and therefore the paint of it were both drastically increased. And at only 180p, it got its special incredibly fast. The range stat alone was just insane, especially given that, like we talked about last time, almost every weapon was nerfed going into this game. In addition to that, Splatoon 2 was full of weaker weapon kits, while Tri-Sloshers was possibly the best one out there at the time. Burst Bomb was way cheaper than it is today. Sub-Saver stacked so well with it you could easily get triple Burst Bomb, it covered range disadvantage, and popping your special instantly refilled your ink tank. Burst Bomb also had a larger hitbox and had less whiting frames or recovery delay at the time. This meant that if your weapon that could outrange short-range shooters still wasn't good enough, you had a sub-weapon you could just chuck at anyone far away from you. But to add on top of all of this is Launch Ink Armor. This special is already infamous at the end of the game's life after a bunch of nerfs. The ability to chain to the entire team to give them protection was just way too good, but back then armor was way more insane than it is today, mainly because there was no damage overlap mechanic. If an E-liter full charged you, you didn't really move at all and you took no extra damage, whereas today anything that does over 100 damage will push you back slightly and decrease your HP by a little bit. This meant that getting armor broken was significantly less punishing now and you could run in with it. In addition to this, the removal animation for ink armor was significantly slower on launch, and during that time, you were basically invincible. So much for removing invincibility specials, Nintendo. Oftentimes when your armor was being broken, you were in a fight with another weapon of similar range than you, and that meant during this period, they basically couldn't shoot back. Oh, and armor also sounded different for some reason. They eventually changed that later. This package of main, sub, and special was just incredibly broken, and the toolkit range and paint of this weapon were so good that you could very easily stack multiple of this weapon. Having multiple burst bombs to spam, constant armor to add HP, and multiple giant hitboxes to shut down anything shorter range than you made it almost impossible to deal with. And that's what made this meta so different. The accessibility of it. It didn't matter if you were by yourself, with a team, or what rank you were. Pretty much anyone can pick up and play the Tri-Slosher and see its effects on the game. You could see big YouTubers like Octoboy grab a squad of full Tri-Sloshers and wreak havoc. So this meant that everyone was taking advantage of it, not just top players. You would see this all the time. No matter what option people tried to use against this, the counterplay to just using a bunch of Tri-Sloshers was significantly harder. In fact, it was only at the very highest level of play where it was worth it to lose a Tri-Slosher or two in a team comp, which got so bad that Nintendo dropped a week 1 patch for the game. This included a few smaller changes, but most importantly, nerfed Tri-Slosher's points for special charge down by 30. Keep in mind, Splatoon 3 has never nerfed it by more than 10 points at a time. And that didn't even put a dent in these comps. You would still find 2 to 3 Tri-Sloshers pretty much everywhere. That's a total increase of about 60 to 90 points for your team's special weapons, which did almost nothing. That's how good it was. So let's say you're a player at this time seeing the Tri-Slosher take over and you didn't want to conform to it. What other options did you have? 3 weapons. Yeah, that's it. The first 2 of these options are centered around Inkjet, being the 10-attack splatter shot and N-parry dualies. N-parry, while way weaker than dualies today in things like less mobility or range, had a 170 jetpack compared to 10-attack, which was made 210 already, which gave it the much better output of the two. 10-attack was a bit more solid of a main weapon and people were more familiar with it. Both of these were okay into armor given the faster fire rates, but you still didn't exactly want to pick fights with Tri-Slosher on this thing. This meant that the main reason they were picked was how broken Inkjet was on launch. This is mostly because Inkjet had a very large blast radius, not just in damage, but also in paint, meaning it was incredibly easy to trap people with one shot and get a kill on them with the other. Inkjet at the time also had a longer duration, giving you 8 shots by default, and jetpack users normally have a hurt box that's a little bit larger than normal players, making it easier to shoot them down. But that wasn't the case back then. This meant that unless if you were up close, Inkjet was hard to hit while it had an easy time hitting you, and had enough range to adequately counter try. Oh, and by the way, the Inkjet exhaust also did like way more damage. I kind of missed kills with this. They were very funny. They should bring this back one day. However, the best option in Try, and the only one to become a big standard in comps, is the Rapid Blaster. This weapon could stay away from Tri-Slosher and dealt enough damage to break armor in one hit. This chip was also a lot stronger considering the longer time to recover HP that we talked about last time, which made it a lot easier. The main weapon also had a larger blast radius than it does today, ink mines were great at removing armor, and Splat Bomb Rush could easily break armor until people started running .1 bomb defense, where even then it was pretty good at it. Basically, Rapid Blaster was good because its entire weapon identity was being anti-ink armor, so it basically had the job of constantly removing it to allow you to fight the other team. This made our standard comp of this meta 3 Tri-Sloshers and 1 Rapid as an anchor. This brings us into patch 1.2, which didn't actually fix the meta at all, but it had a few other relevant changes. Charger's 4-frame nerf was fixed, and E-Liter's is actually slightly buffed now. Dynamo's awful range is somewhat fixed. I mean, it's still terrible, but at least it's not that terrible. And we have the start of many GoodTuber buffs, none of which would lead to it being meta a single time in this game, by the way. We also started reverting other Splatoon 1 nerfs at this point, such as Splatling's run speed finally working again, as well as Dooley's getting shooter range but losing the special spam that they had in this patch, which would mean end parry is still good. Finally, Baller gets a solid HP reduction, but we'll have to get to that later. Since this patch didn't change anything to do with the meta just obviously kept going full steam ahead. Though it wouldn't last that long. Patches were pretty drastic in this game, and it didn't take much before 1.3 was released. This is one of the largest and most influential patches in the game, one that'll have to get its own video. But we'll end today by talking about the nerfs. First up, Inkjet lost the exhaust damage, a true tragedy, but also got its slightly larger hurt box and smaller blast radius in paint and damage, toning it down properly. They also made Tenetec's splatter shot 230 points for special, the absolute highest any weapon has ever gone to. They also made Rapid 210 since it was popular. Not the right nerf at all, but whatever. However, the main nerfs were Tri-Slosher and Ink Armor. Tri-Slosher would get decreased to 52 damage to, I guess, slightly reduce that problem, but most importantly, its firing range would be reduced by 9%, putting it back in line with where it should have been in the first place. Ink Armor would also get its invulnerability period drastically shortened by 8 frames, as well as have damage overlapping be added to Ink Armor again, which for the time being would put Armor and Tri in a more balanced spot. Despite fixing Tri-Slosher though, Splatoon 2 was far from being in a decent spot, as this patch overbuffed a drastic amount of options, and we'll have to see what effect those have next time. Thanks for watching.